You know that specific feeling? It's usually like a Tuesday morning. You
Yeah.
open your laptop, you see a notification for some new AI tool, and for just a split second, your stomach just drops. You think, is this it? Is this the one that makes what I do optional?
It's the modern version of hearing a predator in the tall grass, only the predator is an algorithm.
Exactly. And it's not the Terminator fear. I mean, we've all seen the movies with the lasers and the skulls. This is quieter.
It's more personal.
Yeah. And when I was going through this stack of research you brought today, the IMF reports, all these psychological studies, one phrase just stopped me cold. It wasn't Skynet. It was the useless class.
It is a brutal phrase, isn't it?
It is.
That comes from the historian Yuval Noah Harari. And it feels incredibly harsh to hear it, said out loud.
It sounds like an insult, like you're lazy.
Well, and that's the misunderstanding we need to clear up right away. Harari isn't trying to be mean. He's being diagnostic. The core idea is that for most of human history, the great struggle was against exploitation. People were fighting because they were working too hard for too little.
Right, the classic labor struggle.
Yeah.
Unions, strikes, better wages, all that.
Exactly. But Harari argues that in the 21st century, the real struggle isn't against exploitation, it's against irrelevance. The fear isn't that the system will treat you badly. The fear is that the system just won't need you at all.
That actually hits harder. Being exploited means you feel needed.
Right.
Even if you're treated poorly.
You still have leverage.
Being irrelevant means you're just a ghost.
Precisely. And that is the heart of today's deep dive. We're calling this the AI schism. We're looking at a whole stack of sources legislative bills from New York from 2025, massive IMF reports, and some really fascinating and frankly kind of disturbing psychological studies on AI anxiety.
And our mission today is to figure out if we're actually, splitting into two different types of humans. The people who control the AI and the people who are rendered obsolete by it.
We need to see if we're facing a permanent bifurcation of society. And not just economically, though that's a huge piece of it, but psychologically, cognitively.
Like, are we changing how our brains actually work?
That's the question.
Okay, let's start with the wallet, because that's usually where the panic starts. You mentioned the useless class.
Yeah.
Is this just the same old fear we had during the Industrial Revolution? The Luddites smashing the looms.
Right.
I mean, every time technology advances, people freak out, but then we just end up with better jobs. So why is this time different?
It is the trillion-dollar question, and it's so intuitive to think, oh, we've been here before.
Yeah.
But the data really suggests this time is fundamentally different. If you look at the IMF report from April 2025, they highlight a major distinction. The Industrial Revolution mostly replaced physical labor, muscle.
Machines are stronger than people. Simple.
Yeah. It replaced jobs that required brawn or just repetitive motion. But this wave, the IMF found that AI is specifically targeting high-income, white-collar jobs.
Cognitive labor.
Yeah. We're talking about cognitive labor, pattern recognition, synthesis.
Which is, well, that's us. That's the lawyers, the coders, the project managers.
It's the people who thought they were safe because they thought for a living. And this is where it gets really counterintuitive.
You're right.
The IMF suggests that AI might actually reduce wage inequality.
Wait, hang on. Reducing inequality, that sounds great, right? That's what we want.
It's what you'd think. But that's not what the model predicts. It's not lifting the bottom up. It predicts reducing inequality by dragging the top down.
Oh.
So if you can automate a lawyer or a senior coder, the wage gap between them and, say, a service worker, it shrinks.
So it's not that the barista's making more money, it's that the lawyer's making less.
Exactly. It compresses the labor market.
Yeah.
But, and this is the massive but, while wage inequality might drop, the report says wealth inequality is going to skyrocket.
Okay, you need to break that down for me.
Yeah.
The difference between wage and wealth here seems critical.
It's everything. So think of it this way. Wages are what you get for your time, your effort,
My salary.
your salary. Wealth is what you own, stocks, property, or in this case, the algorithms themselves, the AI.
The capital.
The capital. The IMF models show that while high-end wages drop because humans aren't as necessary, the returns on that capital, the profits from the AI, go entirely to the people who own the AI.
So the workers, even the really high-paid ones, are all fighting over a smaller piece of the pie, while the people who own the server farms are taking the rest of the bakery.
That is a very, very good analogy. The owners of the intelligence capture all the value. Which brings us back to Harari's definition of useless. You said it sounded like an insult.
It still kind of does.
But he's using it in a very strict economic and political sense. If the economic system is built on labor
Hmm.
and an algorithm can do your job better, cheaper, and without needing to sleep,
Then you become useless to that specific system.
you have no bargaining power. You can't threaten to go on strike if the software can replace you in a microsecond.
That makes a cold kind of sense. But here's what I struggle with. Why is a lawyer easier to replace than, say, a plumber or a gardener? I mean, a lawyer spends years in school.
Right.
A gardener is physical work. I thought the robots were coming for the physical jobs first.
And this is something called Moravec's paradox. It turns out that high-level reasoning like logic, legal precedent, even coding is computationally easier to simulate than the fine motor skills you need to trim a rosebush without snapping the stem.
So the smart stuff is actually easy for a computer, and the dumb stuff is hard.
In a way, yeah. The sources use this fascinating comparison. They argue it's much harder to replace a hunter-gatherer with a robot than it is to replace a cardiologist.
A hunter-gatherer.
Seriously, think about it. Think of all the skills involved. A hunter-gatherer needs to track an animal, identify edible plants versus poisonous ones, make a tool from a rock, navigate a forest, read the weather.
It's a huge variety of sensory and motor skills.
A massive variety, whereas a cardiologist,
Specializes in a very narrow niche.
a very narrow, data-rich niche. They interpret data from a heart. And AI loves a narrow niche. Harari posits that something like 99% of human qualities might just be redundant for most modern economic roles.
So if your job is narrow and specialized, you're in the danger zone.
Yeah.
If your job is chaotic and physical, you're safe.
For now.
For now. Wow. That is sobering. Okay, well, let's pivot from that. It's not just about our jobs, is it? It's about what's happening upstairs in our heads.
Right.
I saw one of the studies you pulled was about cognitive atrophy. That sounds like my brain is literally withering away.
This is really the second pillar of the schism. If the economy is the external divide, this is the internal one. We have this one study, AI Tools in Society, that surveyed 666 participants.
Ominous number.
I know, right? But the results were pretty stark.
Well, please tell me it wasn't just, kids these days are glued to their phones.
It goes a lot deeper. They found a significant negative correlation between frequent AI usage and critical thinking skills. They call it cognitive offloading.
Cognitive offloading. But isn't that just a fancy way of saying we're being efficient? Look, I don't wash my clothes by hand anymore. I use a machine. I've offloaded laundry.
Sure.
Does that make me laundry lazy or just smart?
And that's the common defense.
Uh-huh.
But here's the difference. If your biceps get a little smaller because you aren't scrubbing sheets on a washboard, it doesn't fundamentally change your ability to navigate the world.
Right.
But if you offload thinking,
Right.
that's different. The specific term they use is metacognitive laziness.
Metacognitive laziness.
It's the tendency to just skip the active engagement, that wrestling with a problem that actually builds neural connections. Instead of struggling with a tough email, you just prompt the bot.
I mean, I am definitely guilty of this. Why struggle for 20 minutes to phrase something when the bot does it in 3 seconds?
And for one email, that's fine. But the study found something they called an AI rebound effect. When they suddenly took the AI away, the performance of the heavy users just dropped sharply.
So it was worse than if they'd never used the AI in the first place.
Much worse.
So it's not just that they didn't learn the skill. They actually got worse at it.
Correct. The brain really does act like a muscle. If you go from being a marathon runner to a couch potato, your muscles don't just stay the same, they atrophy.
And if you stop making decisions, your critical thinking capabilities erode.
You become dependent.
I'm assuming this is mostly affecting older people. My dad yelling at his iPad.
Actually, the data shows the complete inverse.
Really?
Yeah. Younger participants showed higher dependence and lower critical thinking scores than older participants. The younger generation, the digital natives, were the most susceptible.
Because they never had to build the muscle in the first place.
They never had to.
That is just terrifying for the future of education. What are universities doing about this?
Well, according to one of our sources from November 2025, higher education is suffering from what it calls institutional cowardice.
Whoa. Institutional cowardice. That's strong language for an academic paper.
It is. The critique is that instead of defending the humanities, defending deep reading and critical inquiry, universities are scrambling to merge everything with infoscience. They're creating these schools of AI.
But isn't that what they should do? Prepare kids for the job market.
That's the argument, for sure. But the critics say what they're actually doing is devaluing the degree. Instead of teaching a student how to think, they're just signaling a student's readiness for machine-like corporate tasks,
So they're training students to be assistants to the AI.
rather than thinkers who can challenge it.
So we're graduating a generation of pilots who only know how to fly on autopilot.
That's the fear. We're potentially creating a workforce that's cognitively dependent on the very tools that are making them economically vulnerable.
Okay, let's take SOC. We've got the economic threat, the useless class. We have the brain drain, cognitive atrophy. People have to be freaking out.
They are.
What does the data say about how we're actually feeling?
The psychological data is fascinating. It breaks AI anxiety into two distinct types. First, there is anticipatory anxiety. Okay.
That's the fear of future disruption. Losing your job,
Yeah.
not being able to pay bills, standard stress.
Different stuff, yeah.
But then there's annihilation anxiety.
That sounds biblical.
It's existential.
Yeah.
It's not just, will I have a job? It's, will I matter?
Yeah.
It's the fear of losing human identity or autonomy.
It's a fear that we're not the main characters anymore.
Exactly.
God, that's bleak. Who is feeling this the most?
Well, there's this U-shaped curve when it comes to usage. Moderate AI users, people who use it a bit but aren't dependent,
Yeah.
they have the lowest anxiety. It's like exposure therapy.
Okay, that makes sense. But the heavy users?
High anxiety. And the non-users, also high anxiety because it's the fear of the unknown.
Huh.
But there's also a really interesting gender split in the data.
Oh.
Women scored significantly higher on what they call technoparanoia, so fears about surveillance, privacy.
Right.
Men focus much more on the job replacement anxiety.
That tracks, honestly. So if you're anxious, the logical thing would be to stop using the tool, right? You'd think so. But the source indicates there's a feedback loop. High anxiety can actually drive problematic usage.
Wait, so being scared makes you use it more?
People feel anxious about keeping up, so they rely more on the tool to cope.
It's a vicious cycle. You're scared the machine is smarter than you, so you ask the machine for help, which makes you feel dumber, which makes you more scared.
Exactly. You're outsourcing your agency to the machine to try and quell the anxiety that the machine caused in the first place.
Wow. Okay, let's zoom out. We've talked about our brains, our wallets. What about the world stage? If this is happening to individuals, what's happening to countries?
This is where we run into the concept of data colonialism.
Data colonialism, so like 19th century imperialism, but with fiber optics.
It's a very similar dynamic. In the 19th century, countries like Britain and Japan industrialized first. They used that power to exploit the world for resources.
Right.
The sources argue that today, the US and China are doing the same with AI. But instead of mining for gold or rubber, they're mining for data.
And just leaving everyone else behind.
The World Bank data from 2025 is stark. In high-income countries, 90% of people are online. In low-income countries, it's only 1 in 4.
Wow.
And it's not just an access gap anymore, it's an outcome divide. Even if a developing nation gets online, they often just become data providers for American or Chinese algorithms.
So they're not the customer, they're the product.
Exactly. Harari actually provides a formula for this new power dynamic. He calls it the formula for hacking humans.
Okay, lay it on me. I love a good scary formula.
It is B times C times D equals AHH.
Okay, let's decode that. BCD equals AHH.
B is biological knowledge,
All right.
C is computing power, and D is data. You multiply those three and you get AHH, the ability to hack humans.
Okay, walk me through a scenario.
Right. A major social media platform, we won't name names, has your data. D. They know everything you've ever clicked.
Got it.
Now you're wearing a smartwatch. That gives them B, biological knowledge. They know your heart rate spikes when you see a certain politician's face. They know your pupils dilate when you see a specific kind of ad.
Okay, this is getting creepy.
Yes. Now apply massive computing power, C, to correlate all of that. The algorithm doesn't just know you like cat videos. It knows you're gay before you've come out to yourself. It knows you're pregnant before you've bought a test.
It knows what will make you afraid.
It knows you are likely to vote for a certain leader if you're shown the right sequence of fear-inducing images. The algorithm doesn't just take your job. It could take your free will.
That is the ultimate loss of agency. So, this all sounds pretty grim, honestly. Is anyone actually doing anything about this?
Well, the policy conversation is definitely heating up. The one you hear about most is Universal Basic Income, or UBI.
Right, free money for everyone because the robots took the jobs. I mean, if I'm in the useless class, a check sounds pretty good.
It does sound good on paper. However, one of our sources offers this withering critique. It calls the tech elite's push for UBI symbolic violence.
Symbolic violence. That's a heavy term for giving people money.
It is. The argument is that by pushing for UBI, the tech giants are trying to buy a social license for their total dominance.
What do you mean?
They're essentially saying, yes, we will own everything, we will control society, we will harvest all your data, but here's a monthly stipend so you don't starve.
It's hush money.
It's hush money. It creates a class of passive recipients with no power, just an allowance. It pacifies the useless class without giving them any real purpose or power. It doesn't solve the schism, it solidifies it.
Okay, so if UBI is a trap, what's a more active response? Something that actually empowers people.
There is movement in legislation. In the 2025 legislative session alone, there were 53 bills proposed across 21 states just on AI in education.
So they're not just rolling over.
No, and one stands out. New York Assembly Bill A6874A. It's called the Artificial Intelligence Literacy Act.
But wait, didn't we just say that schools of AI were a bad thing? Isn't AI literacy just teaching kids how to code?
And that's the key distinction. The goal here, and this is happening in about 18 states with new media literacy mandates, is to move away from purely vocational AI training. It's not how to use ChatGPT to write an essay.
And what is it?
It's about critical engagement. It's teaching students to understand bias, to understand how that B times C times D formula works, to understand ethics, and crucially, to know when not to use AI.
So, fighting cognitive atrophy by teaching people to question the machine instead of just obeying it.
Precisely. It's an attempt to keep the human in the loop, not just as an operator, but as a critic. If you know how the magic trick is done, you're less likely to be fooled by the magician.
So, to wrap this up then, we're looking at a world where the economy shifts from labor to capital, wealth inequality explodes. Our brains are at risk of offloading so much thinking that we become less capable. And the psychological toll creates this dependency loop where we use the tech to hide from our fear of the tech.
That is a very solid, if terrifying, summary.
I try my best, but it leaves me with one big hanging question. If the economy doesn't need us, what do we do?
And that leads to my final thought on this whole AI schism. The divide isn't just about money. It's about agency. The danger Harari and others warn about is letting algorithms become the functional owners of society while humans become legally and economically irrelevant.
The useless class again?
Yes. But that leaves us with this provocative takeaway. If 99% of our economic skills really are automated, then we have to decouple human value from economic utility.
What do you mean by that?
I mean, we have to answer a question we haven't had to ask for centuries. For the last few hundred years, a person's worth was defined by their job.
What do you do? It's the first thing you ask someone.
Right. If the answer to what do you do becomes nothing productive, then we have to ask a much bigger question.
Which is?
What is a human for if not for work?
What is a human for?
We might need to find a new definition of value, one that has nothing to do with productivity or wages or efficiency.
That is. I usually leave these deep dives feeling smarter, but today, I feel like I'm leaving with a lot of homework for my soul.
That is a massive question. It might be the most important question we have left.
Thank you so much for walking us through this. It's terrifying but necessary.
My pleasure.
And to everyone listening, don't let your brain atrophy. Ask the hard questions. We'll see you next time on The Deep Dive.